Hey guys, Ryan here, and why do they keep redoing Dino Megazord? I guess in a really quick way, the same reason why people like me keep making videos about it, because people are interested. You can't deny how instantly recognisable that thing is nearly 30 years after it first appeared. This thing became part of pop culture and has kind of remained alive in some way since. I'd say by this point it's on the same par of iconography as like your Optimus Prime or your Millennium Falcon or your Starship Enterprise. But much more similar to Batman's Batmobile, though it is frequently remade in different incarnations, there's still so much nostalgia for that brief period of time where it was in the mainstream that it inevitably keeps making reappearances. Somewhere it doesn't make reappearances though is in the show itself, though if they wanted to they could actually bring it back for this year's Team Up Dino special because it actually featured in the Sentai footage originally. And would it actually be that surprising if they did, given that Hasbro are in the process of releasing 3 different incarnations of it in 2020? It shouldn't really be that surprising given the effort they went to get an actual suit model version of it over for their initial toy exhibition at the New York Toy Fair in 2019. That thing certainly made an entrance at the entrance to the Power Rangers section, and you have to assume that Hasbro must have used that opportunity to scan it or something for their own records and future purposes. Perhaps that information will also come in handy if the rumours are true that the next Power Rangers movie will see a modern team go back into the 90s and meet the original team. They really didn't get the Dino Megazord right in the 2017 film, so perhaps the solution is to straight up return back to the original. But before I get too ahead of myself endlessly speculating on the future of the Dino Megazord from the past, it's actually quite shocking to consider all the toy versions and collector's versions of it that we've had just in the past 10 years. Now obviously this Megazord originally appeared in the majority of the mammoth 60 episode first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Back in the day they really got us good with those repetitive summoning and combining shots, which were shown over and over in all the episodes. It worked though, and naturally it made many of us want to get our hands on the original deluxe Megazord. Even back then there were various versions of it. There were tiny micro machines ones, there was an intermediate scale one with wheels on the back where only the legs detached, but the show definitely did its job right and made you want the real thing, the one that could separate into all 5 Dinozords. I should also mention that back in those pre-internet days, if you were lucky enough to have a friend or family member that lived in Japan, they might have picked you up the 1992 original DX Daizyujin. And even when the Zords were eventually replaced in Season 2, it was done so in a way that each time the Thunder Zords were introduced, you still saw a glimpse of their Dino mode being the original base mode underneath. So the Dinozords stayed on the show far longer than we give them credit for. I've not counted properly, but I'd say they made an average of about 100 episodic appearances throughout those first 2 years of the show. If you compare that to nowadays where a Megazord will only appear an average of 10 to 30 times, you can definitely understand more fully why there's such a generational attachment to this thing. Plus there was the fact that it was having a full-on pop culture moment back then. While the show would eventually move on from the original Megazord, by the time Disney forced a hiatus break on it in 2010 after 17 consecutive original seasons, Bandai was starting to get nostalgic for their previous efforts as well, and did so with the Super Legends line for more collector-based folk in 2009, which included the Retrofire action figure version of the Megazord. Of course, the following year, when Disney had all but given up hope and were looking to offload it as a going concern, they did use that time where no new episodes were being produced to revisit the past and offer us that infamous reversioning of the first half of Season 1 of Mighty Morphin. That actually put the original Megazord back on the screen 17 years after it first appeared, and it's never really gone away again since. 2010 coincided with Bandai's all-new Zordbuilder version of the toy, which would kick off close to a decade of Megazords from them that all shared common ports and could all be imaginatively combined together. I always thought the strangest thing about that toy line was that they never gave us the Dragon Zord. They would however reuse this Megazord mould 3 years later to tie in with the Power Rangers 20 anniversary. It was back, and this time twice the price, and as one of the 2 initial products of the Power Rangers Legacy line, which definitely must have beaten their own estimations of how that line was going to do. This time they were definitely going on the nostalgia of fans from the past, even taking the box and the logo back to the original 90s version. They also upgraded some of the plastic parts with die cast and some chrome paint, so they certainly did a good job at laying the brain magic on us thick to convince us that it wasn't completely the kid's toy it had started off as. Oh, and they put 15 plus on the box, so you really knew that you were the target consumer. At the time, I could barely contain my excitement for this release. I think it was the first time I'd seen something from my childhood sort of back on the shelves again. Obviously it was a new version, but it was instantly recognisable. And of course, I just had to have it once or twice. Over where Super Sentai had come from, Bandai Japan actually got on board with our 20th anniversary as well, with the Super Robot Chogokin release in the same year. It was kind of on par with the figure arts being released at the same time, and is one of those kind of super accurate action figures, though definitely didn't come cheap. Nothing much happened in 2014, but the exact same Legacy Megazord would be re-released for a second and final time, the third time to use that mould overall, in 2015. This time some much needed care and attention was given to both the circumference of the sword, which because of the new chrome coating wouldn't actually fit in the Megazord's hand, and the knees, which due to the way the Zordbuilder ports now worked, could collapse due to the badly thought out weight of the Legacy Dragon Zord, and which was designed afterwards, which not really considering the strength of the mould that they'd gone for. As the Legacy line went on, Bandai became much braver with their design choices, and they gave us some really great releases during that time. Though they did all have some issues, and for the Dino Megazord, it was definitely the knees. It was also the only Legacy release to use stickers, but at the time that just seemed nostalgic back to the 90s original as well, except instead of this time your mum applying them for you, you could do it yourself. Of course, collectors flocking to the various Bandai toy lines weren't the only game going in 2015. Fisher-Price would introduce their Imaginext Megazord toy playset, which was for much younger fans, possibly whose parents had been fans of the original series. It couldn't separate, but they did actually give us separate Zords later on, which couldn't combine. Yeah, it was a very weird line, but I guess fun if you were in preschool. A year later, in 2016, we very almost got a rather beautiful Jakks Pacific Dino Megazord, which seemed to get announced as well as shown in its final prototype form, but unfortunately just never quite made it to the mass market. It's not as weird as it sounds, because at the time Jakks Pacific had produced some large-scale Megaforce and Super Megaforce figures, but as quickly as they appeared, they seemed to be gone again. I was actually looking forward to that. It was going to be a very affordable, very large, non-separating figure. But Bandai Japan had your back with a far less affordable, though equally giant toy. Perhaps that's why the Jakks version never happened, because it had the potential to cannibalize sales of the Bandai Japan version, although I would say they're definitely aimed at very different markets, given how cheap the Jakks Pacific one was going to be compared to, say, the Bandai Japan Gigantic version. Yeah, it was premium Bandai Gigantic Series Daizyujin X Plus Garage toy. And again, although it was a very aesthetically pleasing looking toy for kind of show suit accuracy, it's not one that I ever seriously considered, because it was a one-off and there was nothing in the same size category. 2017, another very busy year. In America, you could finally complete your Builder Megazord figure, following the 5 releases of the Mighty Morphin Rangers from the first 3 waves of the Legacy figures. It was definitely worlds apart from the Super Robot Chogokin action figure in terms of scale and details though. Oh, and speaking of Bandai Japan, they were at it again. This time giving us the Super Mini Pla version, where you basically had to construct your own Zords out of a plethora of pieces. They always seemed a bit too intimidating to me because of how much time you'd have to spend putting the thing together and how fine and small the pieces actually are. But people love them, and you know, I'm sure similar to jigsaws and Lego, the fun is kind of in the building as well as what you get at the end of it. Very impressively, they could actually separate, and the Super Mini Pla Ultrazord, which followed with 2 more releases, was probably a much better thought out release than, say, the Bandai Legacy version. That to me though was all completely overshadowed by what happened literally the next month, the first time Power Rangers, or I suppose Super Sentai, collaborated with the Tamashii Nation's Soul of Chogokin series, and this next release I think really gave us the best of everything. GX72, the Megazord or Daizyujin, certainly rounded out this unofficial quadrilogy of super accurate Bandai Japan collectibles in a big way. It's hard not to love this one. It's near flawless, and I would say the best one we've ever got. Also, it's actually cheaper than that giant non-separating gigantic series one, so definitely pick-up worthy. And finally, at the start of 2018, Bandai America took one last stab at it, kind of showing themselves up really, with their Legacy collection of Dino Zords, or at least 3 of the 5 of them. They only actually released the T-Rex, the Saber-tooth Tiger and the Mastodon before the license ended, or they just gave up the ghost really. I remember when these were announced there was some confusion initially on whether they would actually combine, because they seemed a bit like the recent Power Rangers movie Zords, which were a similar scale and also had minifigures to pilot them. Unfortunately though they didn't, they were some kind of hybrid between those movie Zords and the Fisher-Price toys that didn't combine. It was kind of like Bandai kind of chucking their toys out the pram at the preschool kids and saying, well, we can give you Zords that don't combine too. Yeah, those were quite easy passes for me, and the fact that I'd spent so much on Soul of Chogokin at the time, I was actually pretty grateful about that. It's definitely strange that throughout this period we got so many interpretations of the Megazord or Daizyujin. And I've not even mentioned the pop vinyl style releases because I see them more like desk novelty items than proper toys. There have also been a number of black and gold special edition releases of Megazord, which I don't count because they're not screen accurate. Anyway, Soul of Chogokin for me was the crescendo of this whole elaborate operation. After 9 or 10 tries at this Megazord, this was it, the one we'd always been waiting for. But inevitably, he who owns Power Rangers will eventually remake Dino Megazord again. And as we mentioned at the start, Hasbro are full on it this year. We've got the Play School Heroes Megazord figure. This is from their Mega Mighties line, sort of taking the lead from the old Fisher-Price licensed stuff. Interestingly though, they've waited a little way into this line before venturing into the Dino Megazord. Quite surprising, I thought. But here it is again, and it seems to be winking at us, as though saying, yep, me again. There's also a 10-inch version of Dino Megazord, non-separating, very cheap. About $12 I think, also very sparse on paint, very colour blocky, does nothing for me, and I would have actually preferred that fabled Jakks Pacific one back in the day instead. And finally, and most excitingly for now I guess, we've also got this sort of new Builder Megazord line where you buy it in 3 open packaging packs to get all 5 Zords and combine them. To me, in terms of what's there, this little thing looks like it has more in common with the Bandai 2010 release, but a little bit shocking I thought is that this release does have elbows, which previously only the Super Mini Plat and Soul of Chogokin releases had managed to give us in a combining version of the toy. Here's the thing though, if like me you've already got Soul of Chogokin, I don't think you need this. It's definitely a younger targeted product, not aimed at the collector's market. Though if you want it just for another version to play with and see how differently it transforms to what we've had before, then yeah, go for it. After all, why do they keep redoing Dino Megazord? Because we keep buying it. Thanks for watching you guys, and what do you think of the Dino Megazord? Let me know in the comments below. What's been your favourite release version of it so far? Have you had enough of it, or won't you actually be satisfied until Hasbro do a Lightning Collection version of it someday? Look out for more videos from me soon, make finding them a little bit easier for yourself, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Surely 4,100 of you can't be wrong. You can also follow me for toy pics on Instagram at powerrangergram, where surely nearly 16,000 people can't be wrong. That's really it then, so until the next time, see you later.